Back to the last part of this morning's edition of News and Views. And right now we are doing a live in studio interview, someone whom I've connected with for a very, very long time. And I must say, it's wonderful putting a face to the voice. And I can call him a guru, I can call him a veteran of independent media. We've spoken so much, and also independent journalists, activists, all the way from the United States of America, just landed in South Africa. And I must say, it's an absolute honor, it's a pleasure to welcome none other than Sam Husseini to South Africa. Sam, really, it's just wonderful that you are here, and I'm actually glad, you've landed in South Africa yesterday. Salam Media visiting our studios this morning. Wonderful having you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. It's wonderful seeing the facilities here and what you're trying to do. Independent media in the United States is such a huge challenge and has so many restrictions on it, and the opportunities that you have here are simply tremendous. Thank you for all of your
Well, certainly, and I'm sure, we can obviously learn from your experience because, as I mentioned, you are a veteran, you're a legend, you're a guru of independent media, and just your take on independent media, and looking at Salam Media. Our focus is on humanitarian journalism. That has been our core focus. We are in our 10th year of existence, and this is a defining year for us. Actually, it's a big year for us. 1 decade in humanitarian journalism. Just some of your thoughts that we can learn from.
Well, I think that that's a great title of humanitarian journalism that hasn't caught on in the United States. So I think that there's a tremendous opening there. In terms of the United States, I think one challenge in the independent media there is to how to break out from beyond a narrow confines of who you address, for example. I mean, that's what largely motivated me in terms of getting into the State Department briefings, to find ways, even with your minimal capacities, to challenge the establishment and to draw more people into having an engaged critique of what's going on there. So I think that it's important to bring voices together, to get critical information out to the public, and then to use those resources as a way to challenge the establishment in what ways you can, to further expose them and to bring more people into seeing the deep systemic problems that exist.
Well, clearly, and I think when you talk about the deep systemic problems, and when one looks at the contrast when it comes to reporting the mainstream media versus independent media, it's chalk and cheese. And we've seen it throughout the decades, actually, with major events that have taken place. And I think nothing could be more glaring than the genocide that has been unfolding in Gaza.
Absolutely. I think that it's opened up a lot of people's eyes, but that needs to manifest itself in more real terms. And I mean, what South Africa did with invoking the Genocide Convention, as many of us had been urging a government to do, and then the South African government stepping up to do that, I think further opened up many people's eyes, including all of the information that people were getting out as to the reality of the carnage and the relentless genocidal brutality of Israel, especially in Gaza, but throughout the region in their imperial designs. I think is a critical part of awakening humanity in so many ways. I think that I mean, we're seeing sort of a similar, and the failure of the establishment media, especially in the United States, but throughout, to even call it a genocide, the failure of the European media of their august liberal values, and they can't see reality for what it is, I think expose things to a lot of people. And we're seeing somewhat of a repeat that's connected in terms of the Epstein files. In terms of, I mean, the latest thing that came across my thing was that Epstein was basically financially backing the people behind the Oslo deals, these corrupt deals that further imprisoned the Palestinians and so on. The couple behind it, Epstein left $10 million in his will to their son. And this is finally coming out. So you know that the system is so corrupt, but it's good to see some of the behind the scenes. I'm sure we haven't seen nearly all of it pertaining to this character, and that how connected he is to the US-Israeli establishment.
Well, certainly, and I think, apart from all the gory stuff that we've been hearing about individuals and about the sexual exploitation
Yeah, but it's
of women,
beyond that.
that is just part of it. But from what you are saying, Sam, is there is a bigger picture to this, to the Epstein files.
Absolutely. I mean, the direct sexual depravity of abusing children and exploiting children and so on, they were the immediate victims. But it seems that it's part of a wider network, possibly involving blackmail and other aspects of power politics, to engage in massive conspiracies in terms of rigging the international system, exploiting people economically, so that the victims are far more than simply the individual girls who are exploited here.
Yes, but I think despite these revelations, what we are seeing, and particularly in the United States of America, and when one looks at Donald Trump, for example, and his response to some of these revelations that are starting to surface from the Epstein files, and I think this week there was this incident with one of the CNN reporters as well, Caitlin Collins as well, where she questioned Donald Trump and became very, very evasive. Now, within the US and within the mainstream media in the United States of America, we are seeing somewhat of a huge, I would say, contrast in terms of even reporting on the Epstein files. Are we starting to see the media, the mainstream media, getting to grips with the reality of what is happening? Where previously, obviously, we had things like embedded media, we had a media that obviously followed a certain line, it followed a certain agenda, dictated by governments, dictated by certain individuals, personalities, powerful personalities, owners of this media. Are we starting to see some sort of shift in that direction?
There's a clear hunger for it, but I think that the institutions and groups to manifest that are in their embryonic state. The establishment media are exposed for many to see, and there's a lot of good information, but it's piecemeal on various platforms like X and so on. But they're highly problematic in their own ways. They can rig the algorithm. We saw what happened with TikTok, that there was too much pro-Palestinian stuff there. So they brought in the Ellisons to pull the plug on it, and now people are trying to build alternatives. And it shows that they're not even out for their own profit. They're not out to build. These are propaganda instruments. They're not trying to maximize audience, even. So it's a gigantic problem, and I think we just simply have to build these independent institutions and to get good information out to the public, and so that can lead to various action. I mean, feel free to interject on that, but I mean, I've been focusing on the whole Uniting for Peace process, and that was the next step to build on what South Africa did with the Genocide Convention. And I was calling for meaningful action for the General Assembly to take control of the situation, because the US was rigging everything clearly, even under Biden and then under Trump at the Security Council. And unfortunately, no country jumped on that until Petrov started talking about it in the fall, but he never actually even submitted the resolution to do Uniting for Peace. So we never even had a vote to say which countries are going to stand up and call for economic sanctions on Israel, call for a peace force, call for a meaningful tribunal, call for all of these things to really put the squeeze on Israel. The General Assembly had just put out these rhetorical statements, and they're nice, I suppose, but we've had enough rhetorical statements. We need action.
Absolutely.
So it's just, and now we see Petrov going and meeting with Trump, and we see what the appeasement of the United States leads us, right? The world didn't make a stand on Gaza as it should have, didn't do Uniting for Peace, didn't put in sanctions on Israel, didn't put the US on notice. So now we see the United States going to further aggression in Venezuela, in Cuba potentially. They're suffocating the food situation. I was in Cuba a year ago, and the food situation even then was critical, and now is becoming dire. So they have no petrol and so on. So the United States empire has been appeased, and so it's moving further in its aggression.
No, absolutely. But also, I think what is disappointing to note is the media has not put the squeeze on Israel throughout this genocide, and even after what we know as the so-called sham, a peace plan, the border peace that Donald Trump is talking about. And we've seen that as a result of the media not putting the squeeze, despite knowing all the hundreds of journalists that have been killed in Palestine as well. All of that actually put together tells us that the media hasn't woken up to the reality of what this world is all about.
Yes, I think unfortunately the media, the establishment media, are part of the establishment. So they will duck and weave and maybe pretend to do something decent once in a while, but in general, they're effectively covering up the perpetration of I mean, they're still talking about a ceasefire now, and without saying so-called ceasefire, Israel can kill people every day, sometimes in the double digits, and it's still a ceasefire. Israel is now escalating its attacks on Lebanon. You have the U.S. Attempting to compel the Lebanese government to go after Hezbollah. Anybody who raises a meaningful pushback against the empire, they themselves become a target. And the media very often facilitate in terms of targeting any brave entity or individual in that regard. I mean, my own personal experience, I was dragged out of the State Department for trying to question Blinken. I didn't get a single, I got a mention in the New York Times, but I didn't get a single interview in the United States. You know, they say that they want sensationalism. They don't want sensationalism. They don't want any of the things that they say they do. They don't even want to make profit. They are largely a propaganda apparatus, and I think they need to be understood as such.
Sam, is there any effort to silence voices like yourself?
To marginalize, most certainly. I mean, my experience with the State Department, I was able to get back into the briefing room after. I mean, they avoided calling on me throughout my time there, but then especially, and then they rescinded my card and then gave it back without explanation because they knew they didn't have a case to take it away from me. They put seating so that I'm way in the back, right by the door, in case they want to haul me off again. And they violate their own rules in the State Department briefing room in terms of calling on people. But this is just, my limited personal experience. I think the broader pattern of silencing any meaningful dissent, silencing any meaningful voices, as you say, all of the hundreds of journalists who were slaughtered in Gaza. You would think that even the human rights groups and the press rights groups in the United States have been muted, and in Europe, I should say, have been muted in their objections and, what they should do for something like this, and the mass, and that it goes hand in hand with the genocidal assault, that you want to kill the messenger, you want to kill all of the journalists who might speak up. And it started before that, I mean, Shireen Abu Akleh was killed, 5 years ago?
Correct. Yes.
It goes way back for Israel or the United States to suffocate any voices that might alert the U.S. public and get them engaged in a meaningful way.
Yes, and also I think what is important to understand is the type of language that media is using, and I think this is absolutely important, and I think we see this here in South Africa as well. Mm-hmm. And obviously we enjoy religious freedom, we enjoy press freedom to a large extent. Obviously, we are able to say what we want to say, and without being sanctioned. And I don't think we have the challenges that the United States, or even in the Arab world, or even in Europe, where media, obviously, independent media face these challenges. But I think one of the most critical things here is, again, is language. And even in South Africa, it's disappointing to see the media coverage, for example, of the genocide. And like you mentioned, they still talk about the ceasefire without taking into account what is happening, because there is no ceasefire, because all it's happened is to tell the Palestinians that you cease, we fire.
Absolutely.
And the media hasn't come to terms with this.
Yeah, I think you're being generous by saying they haven't come to terms with it. I think that they are part of the propaganda apparatus. And we also see Israel effectively taking off half of Gaza. Part of what I want to see develop in my trip here is to talk with other serious activists as to what we have and what tools we can use to bring about these things. I mean, South Africa in the Genocide Convention case went back for 3 emergency orders. And only in the 3rd one did the court give a direct order to Israel. You began your invasion of Rafah on May 7th, 2024. You must immediately stop it. That came down on May 24th by the court. And then the US Biden hijacked the process at the UN by claiming that Netanyahu agreed to a ceasefire, this phony thing, and they got their phony resolution in June of 2024. And then Trump built on that with his phony resolution on his board of peace, which is, outright a colonial enterprise. Is it possible that we could have more emergency orders for the Israeli land grab, for example? Can we go back to the court, get emergency orders, and then get the UN General Assembly to seize control of the issue? Because so long as it stays in the Security Council, you're going to get these depraved resolutions like Trump's colonial imperial board of peace. We need to develop strategies. We need to go beyond informing and dissent into the realm of strategy of how to change our future.
Yes. Sam, let's just come to your visit to South Africa. What are you hoping to achieve? Who are you hoping to meet up with, and what would be the objective?
Yeah, well, I mean, to build global solidarity and to develop these strategies for what are the pieces that we have together. For example, the flotilla is coming. The flotilla, they grabbed it just a little bit after Petro talked about uniting for peace. And I had wished that the global flotilla would have run with that ball, because they came from 45 countries. And if they went back to their countries and pushed each of those countries to get behind the Uniting for Peace proposal, that could have averted
absolutely
what keeping things in the Security Council and Trump ultimately doing what he did. So we need to see what resources we have of independent media, of activism, of things like the flotilla, and use those in order to alter our reality. So we need more coordination among ourselves so that we step into the realm of strategy.
Well, certainly. And I think just talking about the flotilla, the Global Sumut Flotilla obviously had a press conference yesterday, and some of the international players in the flotilla movement were in South Africa at the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And it's just good to see with the launch of the 2026 Spring Flotilla, the global voices, and you mentioned 45 countries, and this time hope to actually extend it to 100 countries.
Wow.
And 3,000 people as part of the flotilla. That is obviously the plan. So again, South Africa used as a base, for this movement to grow.
I mean, Trump is attempting to at least threaten to replace the UN with his board of peace, and in that way pushing the UN to become more imperialistic. And I think something like the flotilla can effectively give voice and representation to the global call of humanity, and in effect be a complete counter lever and push things in a very different direction. That's the opportunity before us if we can coordinate properly.
Well, Sam, we've always been saying that with the genocide in Gaza, it's going to change the trajectory. It's going to define what a new world order is going to be looking like. And this is what we're seeing happening on the ground. So, Trump can do whatever he wants to when it comes to international institutions like the United Nations or whatever, institution that he feels that he can dictate to, but he can't dictate to the people on the ground, because the world has woken up to a very, very harsh reality, be it as a result of the deaths, the destruction, the devastation, the nightmare that has taken place in Gaza. But at the end of the day, the world is now starting to move in a different direction.
That's our task, to make that real, to see that trajectory, and to ultimately free us all from these shackles. Absolutely.
Well, Sam, I must say it's been an absolute pleasure putting a face to the voice. We've spoken many times on air, but really it's been absolutely wonderful. And really, we appreciate you thinking of us at Salam Media, taking time out the very next day after you've landed, being a guest at our studios in Salam Media. All the best to you.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Yes, a legend and a guru in independent broadcasting all the way from the United States of America, with me, Sam Husseini. And clearly, for us at Salam Media, it's an absolute pleasure. We're truly inspired. And until we meet again, from myself and the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.